Boobala.
Good morning, my dear.
Miss, darling, I called you Boobala.
The world will little note, nor long remember.
The 1960s were all glitz, glamour, and dreams too big. But dreams can turn into nightmares faster than you can say, action. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on those untold stories about the stars who faced battles they couldn't win. Number 1, Mark Lester.
I went to stage school, Corona Academy of Dramatic Art, when I was 5 years old, and I'd done quite a few little minor roles beforehand, and there was an audition process. I was selected from, I think there was about 5,000 boys who were initially auditioned, and it got...
Remember the cute kid who played Oliver Twist in the 1968 film Oliver and stole everyone's heart with his big eyes and innocent face?
Lisa, I want some more.
After winning over the world with his portrayal of the orphan, Mark found out that being a child star was easy, but transitioning into adult roles? Not so much. By the time he hit his late teens, the offers dried up. One day he was at the top, the next day, crickets. Hollywood had moved on, and Mark found himself wondering, what now? Then things took an unexpected and weird turn when Mark's life crossed paths with none other than Michael Jackson. The two became friends, with Jackson apparently being a huge fan of Oliver. It is hard to picture Oliver Twist hanging out with a king of pop, but hey, Hollywood friendships are strange.
Still maintained your friendship with him?
Yep.
Did you see how it affected him psychologically, physically? Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, certainly after the allegations in 2005, Michael was deeply hurt and deeply troubled by these allegations, and he chose then rightly to fight these allegations in court.
After Jackson passed away, rumors started flying that Mark might actually be the biological father of Jackson's kids. Yep, you heard that right. Apparently, Mark had donated sperm for Jackson years earlier. Suddenly, the media frenzy was back in full swing, and Mark found himself at the center of a whole new kind of spotlight, one that had nothing to do with acting. No solid proof was ever given, but the gossip? Oh, it was juicy. Mark is now far from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, that's for sure. These days, he is happily practicing as an osteopath in the UK. Number 2, Patty Duke. Patty Duke nailed the role of Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker, and at just 16 years old, she walked away with an Oscar.
The winner is Patty Duke in The Miracle Worker.
But behind that Hollywood smile, Patty's life was far from glamorous. Her fame came with a side of chaos. While her career took off, her personal life was more of a crash landing. She struggled with undiagnosed bipolar disorder, which led to all sorts of wild behavior, messy relationships, and enough tabloid headlines to fill a book. Seriously, Hollywood should have put her life on the big screen. There was enough drama to rival any blockbuster. In the 1980s, she finally got her bipolar diagnosis, and that changed everything. She became a mental health advocate. She used her own struggles to help others. She showed the world that even when life knocks you down, you can still get up and even help a few others along the way.
It began with about when I was 19, which is a common age for the onset. It began with the Great Depression, the not being able to get out of my bed for 2 or 3 months at a time, except to use the bathroom.
Number 3, Ally MacGraw.
I forgot my key.
Jenny, I'm sorry.
Don't. Love means never having to say you're sorry.
She was the Hollywood it girl in the 1960s and 1970s. She had the looks, the charm, and a whole lot of star power. After her role in Goodbye, Columbus, and then Love Story, she was basically everywhere. I mean, she earned an Oscar nomination and could have had the world at her feet. But Hollywood is a tricky beast. It loves you until it doesn't. Allie's personal life started to blend with her career, and not in the best way. First, she married producer Robert Evans, which kept her in the headlines. But it was her next marriage to Steve McQueen that really flipped the script of her life.
I've always thanked God I wasn't a woman who was in love with him. I loved him, but I'm so glad I was never the object of that kind of affection, because I think he was really brutal with women.
McQueen wasn't just a leading man on screen. He had a bit of a controlling streak off screen, and soon Allie found her career taking a backseat to their rocky relationship. After their divorce, Allie found herself in a strange spot. Hollywood had moved on. She tried to fight her way back, but it was like trying to light a match in a rainstorm. Add a battle with addiction to the mix, and Allie's career wasn't what it once was. But Allie didn't let Hollywood define her. She went to rehab, turned her life around, and reinvented herself. She might not have hit the heights of Love Story again, but she proved that sometimes the comeback is even better than the first act. Number 4, Doris Day. The woman with a smile that could light up a room and a voice that could melt butter.
Flew in from the Windy City is mighty pretty, but they ain't got what we got.
On screen, she was America's sweetheart, starring in hits like Calamity Jane and Pillow Talk, giving everyone a warm, fuzzy escape from reality. But behind the sunny persona, well, her life was more like a soap opera than a rom-com. The biggest twist in her real-life plot came when her husband, Martin Melker, passed away in 1968. Instead of leaving her for a fortune, he left her with a mountain of debt and some unpleasant surprises. Turns out he had blown through her money and even signed her up for a TV show, The Doris Day Show, without her knowledge. Imagine waking up one day, broke and suddenly contractually obligated to work when all you wanted was to retire and play with your dogs. So Doris had no choice but to get back to work. She starred in the TV show from 1968 to 1973, and while it was a hit, it wasn't exactly her dream gig. After the show ended, she quietly slipped out of the Hollywood scene and dedicated the rest of her life to animal rights activism. Because, let's face it, dogs are way more loyal than husbands who blow through your life savings. Number 5, George Sanders. George Sanders was the kind of guy you would picture in a tuxedo.
Meet my family. This is my Aunt Ernestine.
Enchanted, mademoiselle. Your cake, and especially its filling, were a revelation.
Sipping martinis while casually dropping Oscar-winning one-liners. With roles in classics like Rebecca and All About Eve, he oozed sophistication and wit, the kind of charm that made you think he had it all figured out. But behind all that smoothness was a man battling some serious inner demons. Despite his cool demeanor, George struggled with depression throughout his life. After his marriage to actress Zsa Zsa Gabor ended, his mental health started to spiral. By the 1960s, as his career slowed down, so did his will to keep up the charade.
How can it not? Because, Inspector, it's being administered by a gentleman.
In 1972, at the age of 65, Sanders took matters into his own hands and checked out of life, quite literally. He left a note that could only be described as very George Sanders in style. Dear world, I am leaving because I am bored. I feel I have lived long enough. I am leaving you with your worries in this sweet cesspool. Good luck. A mic drop from the grave, if ever there was one. Number 6, Tuesday Weld. Tuesday Weld. What a name, right? It sounds like she was destined to be a star, and for a while, she was exactly that.
What happened to your coat?
I ripped it. What'd you do today?
I went to the movies, and it was all in French.
In French, huh?
Yeah. Know what they do? They sign the words in at the bottom of the picture.
She burst onto the scene in the 1960s with her wild beauty and rebellious spirit, starring in films like The Cincinnati Kid and Pretty Poison. But while Hollywood loved her, Tuesday didn't always love Hollywood back. Her childhood was tough. Her dad died when she was just 3, and by 9, she was the family breadwinner as a child model. No pressure for a kid, right? By 12, she already had a nervous breakdown, started drinking, and even attempted suicide. Instead of being helped, she got pushed deeper into the spotlight. She had to play grown-up roles while still trying to survive childhood. As a teen, she dated older guys like Elvis and Frank Sinatra. Yep, that's Sinatra. But it wasn't exactly romance. She was looking for a father figure after losing hers young. And while Hollywood adored her, Tuesday didn't feel the same. She turned down major roles in Lolita and Bonnie and Clyde because, well, she didn't care about being a star. And the drama didn't end there. 2 failed marriages, estranged from her kids, and a lifetime of mental health battles. Now in her 70s, Tuesday has basically disappeared from public life, living quietly and far from Hollywood. Number 7, Carolyn Jones. Most of us know her as the gloriously goth Morticia Addams, the queen of deadpan humor and macabre glam. The Addams family made her a pop culture legend.
Why, Boobala.
Good morning, my dear.
Miss, darling, I called you Boobala.
The world will little note, nor long remember? No.
Miss, dear, would you like a little snack, some pâté de foie gras?
But Carolyn's career stretched far beyond that iconic role. She earned an Oscar nomination for The Bachelor Party. But while she was killing it on screen, Carolyn's real life was much more tragic. She suffered from serious health problems, including colon cancer, which eventually took her life in 1983. Even in the face of this devastating illness, Carolyn refused to slow down. She filmed her last scenes for the soap opera Capital from a wheelchair while battling pain and exhaustion, because she was just that determined to keep working until the end. Her drive to keep doing what she loved, even when her body was failing her, is admirable and heartbreaking both. Carolyn passed away at just 53 years old. She will always be remembered as the queen of the dark and spooky, but her real-life story was filled with pain that even Morticia's iconic one-liners couldn't mask. Number 8, Rusty Hammer. Remember Rusty Hammer? Well, probably not, unless you're a classic TV buff.
What did I tell you? You liked it, huh?
Yeah, did I? Boy, you should have seen him.
Him? Who him? The judge?
No, Charlie's father, Mr. Schneiderhoff.
Oh, the lawyer fellow. But tell me about the judge. Was he wearing a black robe?
Yeah, boy, is he important. You should have seen him.
The judge?
No, Mr. Schneiderhoff. Your Honor, I inject.
Rusty was one of the most famous child stars of the 1950s and 1960s. He grew up in front of the world as Rusty Williams on The Danny Thomas Show, also called Make Room for Daddy. When the show ended in 1964, so did Rusty's career. Hollywood quickly forgot about him, and Rusty struggled to make ends meet with odd jobs. No more TV sets, no more cameras, just the harsh reality of being a former child star trying to survive in a world that had moved on without him. Sadly, Rusty's story didn't have a happy ending. By 1990, he was battling severe depression and, feeling completely lost, took his own life at the age of 42. Rusty's tragic end showed the dark side of Hollywood, where the bright lights can go out fast, leaving young stars like him forgotten, with no real support once the fame fades.
That was some act you put on yesterday.
Wasn't it, though? I guess maybe I'll become an actor like you when I grow up.
Number 9, William Holden. Now, this guy was a legend.
And Technicolor to photograph the red swollen tongue.
You wake up the monkey.
Get out! Max!
Next time I'll bring my autograph album along. Or maybe a hunk of cement and ask for your footprint.
William ruled Hollywood in the 1950s and 1960s with hits like Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17, and The Bridge Over the River Kwai. He was the kind of actor who could charm an audience without even trying, and won an Oscar for his role in Stalag 17. But while the world saw him as a Hollywood heartthrob, behind the scenes, William Holden was battling demons that no amount of awards could fix. Holden's biggest struggle was alcohol. He fought with it for most of his life, but by the 1970s it was getting the best of him. Though he still found success in films like Network, the effects of his alcoholism were hard to ignore. The real tragedy came in 1981. After a night of heavy drinking, Holden slipped, hit his head on a table, and bled to death in his apartment. Even worse, he wasn't found until days later. It was a tragic and lonely end for one of Hollywood's brightest stars, a sobering reminder, no pun intended, of how addiction can take even the most successful people down. Number 10, Anthony Perkins. Anthony Perkins will forever be known as that guy. Yep, the one who made showers terrifying for everyone after playing Norman Bates in Psycho. His creepy performance cemented him in Hollywood history, but it also trapped him in a role he couldn't escape.
Do you ever take the character home?
Oh, no. No, I think I used to do that when I was a bachelor, when I was living by myself. You know, I had kind of a self-involved existence, but...
No matter what else he did, people always saw him as the guy with mummy issues and a butcher knife. Off-screen, Perkins lived a much more complicated life. He was intensely private, especially about his sexuality, at a time when being openly gay in Hollywood was a career death sentence. He had secret relationships with men, including fellow actor Tab Hunter, but in 1973, Perkins married photographer Barry Berenson. Some say it was more of a career move than a reflection of his true feelings, though. In the early 1990s, Perkins got some devastating news. He was diagnosed with HIV, and he didn't even get the courtesy of hearing it from his doctor. Nope, he found out through a tabloid article. Talk about adding insult to injury. Anthony Perkins passed away in 1992 from AIDS-related pneumonia, his life marked by the same quiet struggles that defined his career. Despite the fame, he lived in the shadow of Norman Bates, and behind that, a life of secrecy and sorrow. Number 11, Natalie Wood. Natalie had it all: beauty, talent, and an acting career most could only dream of. From West Side Story to Rebel Without a Cause, she was the Hollywood darling everyone adored.
You cold?
No. No, it's like the snowstorm.
But it is not her films that people remember most. It is the mysterious way she died that still has people scratching their heads.
Do you believe Natalie Wood was murdered?
I think it's suspicious enough to make us think that something happened. I don't think she got in the water herself.
The ultimate problem is we don't know how she ended up in the water.
In November of 1981, Natalie was aboard her husband Robert Wagner's yacht, Splendor, along with co-star Christopher Walken and the yacht's captain. What was supposed to be a nice weekend on the water turned into a tragedy when Natalie's body was found floating a mile from the boat. The official cause of death was drowning, but the story is way murkier. Rumors of a heated argument between Natalie and Wagner spread, and fingers were pointed, though no charges were ever filed.
Everything that I've heard from Dennis, Natalie's temper was surfacing, RJ's certainly was. It got out of hand in the worst way possible.
Years later, the case was reopened and Wagner was labeled a person of interest.
We have received information which we felt was substantial, enough to make us take another look at this case.
But the mystery remains unsolved today. Natalie's death has left a permanent shadow over her otherwise sparkling career. She was 43 with a life cut short by circumstances no one can fully explain. The whole thing reads like a Hollywood script, except this time there is no clear ending. Number 12, Sharon Tate. Sharon Tate was on her way to becoming a Hollywood superstar in the 1960s. With roles in films like Valley of the Dolls and The Fearless Vampire Killers, she had beauty, charm, and talent to spare. Plus, she was married to hotspot director Roman Polanski.
We're talking to Miss Sharon Tate, and we're aboard the Princess Italia after the premiere of Valley of the Dolls. And may we offer our congratulations. I guess this is your first major dramatic role. The part calls for someone who is beautiful as well as talented, and the beauty is required because of...
Everything seemed perfect, but in one of the most horrific crimes in American history, Sharon's life was tragically cut short.
Cult leader Charles Manson.
On August 8, 1969, he instructed his family of followers to kill everyone at the home of a record producer who once rejected him as a client.
On August the 9th, 1969, Sharon, who was 8 months pregnant, was brutally murdered by followers of Charles Manson in her own home. The Manson family wasn't even targeting Sharon specifically. They wanted to send a message, and her house just happened to be the unlucky one. Along with Sharon, 4 others were killed in what became one of the darkest moments in Hollywood history. Sharon's death stunned the world. She was so young, so full of promise, and just getting started. Instead of being remembered for the star she was on the verge of becoming, her name has become forever linked to the madness of the Manson murders. Sharon Tate's life was one of beauty and rising fame, but her death has turned her into a symbol of senseless violence and lost potential. Number 13, Mia Farrow. Mia Farrow's career took off with her chilling role in Rosemary's Baby, where she played a woman unknowingly carrying the spawn of Satan. Spooky stuff. But as scary as that movie was, Mia's real-life drama turned out to be even more haunting. For decades, she has been overshadowed by her personal life, especially her relationship with director Woody Allen, which ended in one of the messiest scandals in Hollywood history. Mia and Woody were together for over a decade, making movies and raising kids. Everything seemed fine until it wasn't. Woody's affair with Mia's adopted daughter, Soon-Yi Previn, blew everything up. The affair led to a very public, very ugly custody battle, where Mia accused Woody of sexually abusing another one of her adopted children, Dylan. While the courts didn't find enough evidence to convict Woody, the accusations have lingered, casting a shadow over both their careers. As if that weren't enough, Mia also faced the heartbreaking loss of 3 of her adopted children. Through it all, she has remained a committed humanitarian, throwing herself into her work as a goodwill ambassador for UNICEF. Mia's life is one of resilience in the face of heartache, scandal, and loss. Despite her incredible career, the tabloid drama and personal tragedies have always loomed large. All of this makes her story one of Hollywood's most complicated and painful ones. Number 14, Jane Mansfield. Jane Mansfield was commonly compared to Marilyn Monroe, and like Monroe, she became a symbol of the 1950s blonde bombshell.
Now about those nylons. I just want everything clear and on the table.
Well, about the nylon.
I know what you want. I know what you want. And where?
A persona she cultivated both on and off the screen. Mansfield's career was built on her sex appeal, and she starred in a number of films during the 1950s and early 1960s, including The Girl Can't Help It and Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter?
You're presented as a symbol of sex appeal. Now, I wonder if you care to define that phrase, sex appeal.
Sex appeal is a wonderful, warm, womanly, healthy feeling. If you're a woman, it's womanly. If you're not, it's manly.
But while her public image was glamorous, her personal life was filled with turbulence and tragedy. Mansfield's rise to fame was meteoric, but her career began to falter as she became increasingly typecast in comedic roles that played up her curves rather than her acting talent. As the 1960s progressed, Mansfield found herself struggling to stay relevant in a changing Hollywood, and she began appearing in low-budget films and nightclub performances to make ends meet. The real tragedy of Mansfield's life came in its final moments. On June the 29th, 1967, Mansfield was killed in a horrific car accident when her vehicle collided with a tractor-trailer on a Louisiana highway. The crash instantly killed Mansfield, along with 2 others in the car. Her 3 children, including future Law & Order SVU star Mariska Hargitay, survived the crash, but Mansfield's death at just 34 years old cemented her place in Hollywood's tragic history. Her untimely death overshadows Mansfield's legacy, but she was much more than the sex symbol she portrayed. She was a smart, ambitious woman who carved out a space for herself in a male-dominated industry. Yet the pressures of fame and the limited opportunities available to women like her in Hollywood ultimately contributed to her tragic downfall. Number 15, Carol Ohmart. Carol Ohmart was once billed as the next big Hollywood star.
You remember the fun we had when you poisoned me?
Something you ate, the doctor said.
Yes, arsenic on the rocks. Annabelle, you'd do it again if you thought you could get away with it, wouldn't you?
Darling, what makes you think that?
In the mid-1950s, Paramount Pictures pointed her as their answer to Marilyn Monroe, hoping to catapult her to stardom with roles that capitalized on her striking beauty. She starred in The Scarlet Hour and House on the Haunted Hill, but despite her undeniable talent and screen presence, Ohmart never achieved the level of fame that was expected of her. Ohmart's career never took off in the way her studio had envisioned, and by the 1960s, she found herself in low-budget horror films and guest appearances on television shows.
Everything I have, even my life, but you're not going to live to enjoy it. Come with me, murderess. Come with me.
Her attempts to break free from the constraints of being typecast as a glamorous blonde led to frustration, and she became disillusioned with the Hollywood system. Eventually, Ohmart left the industry altogether. She retreated from the spotlight that had once promised her so much. The tragedy of Carol Ohmart's story lies not in any great personal scandal or dramatic downfall, but in the slow erosion of a promising career that never really quite materialized. She was a talented actress who deserved more than she got from Hollywood, and her departure from acting was as quiet as her rise had been full of potential. Ohmart spent her later years away from the public eye. She lived in relative obscurity until her death in 2002. Her story reminds us how many actors come to Hollywood with dreams of stardom, only to find that the industry's promises are fleeting. While Carol Ohmart's name may not be as well known today, she remains an emblem of the many talents who never got the recognition they deserved. Number 16, Ed Burns. Remember Ed Burns? If you were a teen in the late 1950s and early 1960s, you definitely do.
Explain this to me.
All right, so, I always wanted to play guitar, always had a guitar, tried to teach myself, could never do it. I tell my wife this, and then for my 35th birthday, a long time ago, she gets me a guitar and lessons.
He played Kooky, the cool, comb-wielding bad boy on 77 Sunset Strip. Kooky was so slick with his hair and attitude that Ed quickly became the guy every teenager wanted to be or date. But as it goes in Hollywood, fame doesn't always stick around as long as you would like it to. After 77 Sunset Strip ended, Ed found himself stuck in a role he couldn't escape. People loved him as Kooky, but nobody wanted him to be anything else. He was typecast as the cool guy, and Hollywood didn't know what to do with him once he wasn't the hot new thing. By the mid-1960s, the fan letters stopped, the roles dried up, and Ed's career took a nosedive. Personal struggles followed, including a battle with alcoholism, and despite landing a few smaller roles here and there, he never hit the same heights again. His life became a classic story of how fame can fade faster than a greased-up pompadour. Number 17, Jack Weld. Now, here's a kid who seemed destined for greatness. He was an artful dodger who couldn't dodge life's hard hits. At just 16 years old, he became a household name as the lovable, artful dodger in Oliver. This performance earned him an Academy Award nomination and made him one of the hottest young stars in Hollywood. But after hitting it big as a child, the transition to adult roles was, well, not so great. Like many young stars, Jack struggled to find the same level of success as he got older. Hollywood pigeonholed him as the cute kid, and when the roles stopped coming, Jack turned to alcohol to cope. As he entered his 20s, his career had all but evaporated, and his personal life was spiraling. In 2000, Jack was diagnosed with oral cancer, the result of years of heavy drinking and smoking. He lost his ability to speak and spent his final years battling the illness. He passed away in 2006 at just 53 years old. Jack's story is one of immense talent lost too soon, a cautionary one of how fame can sometimes come with a dark price tag. Number 18, Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed was one of those actors who gave everything on screen and even more off screen. Known for his intense roles in films like Women in Love and The Devils, Reed's acting chops were undeniable. But his love for booze was legendary. His wild, hard-drinking lifestyle almost became more famous than his acting. He was the one who drank and died as he lived. Reed was the kind of guy who didn't just have a drink, he had all the drinks. Brawls in bars, marathon drinking sessions, showing up to sets plastered, these were just average Tuesday activities for him. But while he earned a reputation as a Hollywood bad boy, the same lifestyle started to take a toll on his career. Directors and co-stars found it tough to work with someone who was as unpredictable as he was talented. In 1999, while filming Gladiator in Malta, Reed went on one of his infamous binges. He challenged sailors to drinking contests, downed an absurd amount of alcohol, and then collapsed from a heart attack. He died in true Oliver Reed fashion, mid-party. Though he didn't live to finish the film, his final scenes were completed with CGI, and he still managed to appear in one of the biggest hits of his career. Number 19, Omar Sharif. Omar Sharif was Hollywood's exotic heartthrob in the 1960s. With his swoon-worthy looks and unforgettable performances in epics like Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago, Sharif was an international sensation.
You are welcome. He was my friend. That? Yes, that.
He had the charm, the talent, and the world at his feet. But behind the dashing smile was a man with one big vice, gambling. While most actors live for the next big role, Sharif was more interested in the next big bet. He was obsessed with gambling, so much so that he famously said bridge was more important to him than acting. It wasn't just bridge, though. Sharif's gambling habits extended to anything he could place a bet on, and over the years he gambled away most of his fortune. In the 1990s, he was reportedly broke, his addiction having drained his bank account and strained his relationships. Sharif's later years were a shadow of his earlier stardom. He battled Alzheimer's, and the man who had once been a brilliant actor and a master card player was losing his sharpness. When he passed away in 2015, Sharif had mostly retreated from the spotlight. His dazzling career and larger-than-life personality dulled by addiction and illness. Number 20, Sal Mineo. Sal Mineo had everything going for him in the 1950s. After his unforgettable role as Plato in Rebel Without a Cause, where he played a vulnerable, troubled teen obsessed with James Dean's character, he became an instant sensation.
You ain't had a piece of crap that fits you since you walked through that door. Like it's fixing to look better in the guard's room when the tailor's not looking. Well, I like everything new, Mona. Get off my bed.
His performance was so raw and emotional that it earned him an Oscar nomination at just 17 years old. But that success turned out to be a double-edged sword. Mineo was one of the first actors to live openly as a gay man in Hollywood, which was an incredibly bold move in the conservative 1950s and 1960s. Unfortunately, the industry wasn't as open-minded. Sal found himself typecast as the sensitive outsider and struggled to land roles that would let him show his range. Hollywood just didn't know what to do with him. While other actors were being handed leading roles, Sal was left scrambling for whatever parts he could get, mostly smaller roles in lesser-known films or TV appearances. Behind the scenes, his personal life was just as tough. Despite the courage it took to be true to himself, being openly gay in that era meant facing constant discrimination, both in his career and personal relationships. His early fame faded, and by the 1970s, the once promising star was struggling to stay relevant. Then the ultimate tragedy struck. On February the 12th, 1976, at just 37 years old, Sal Mineo was stabbed to death outside his apartment in West Hollywood. The randomness of the crime shocked everyone. A life so full of promise was gone in an instant. His murderer, Lionel Ray Williams, was caught and convicted, but that didn't change the devastating fact that Sal Mineo's life, full of struggles, courage, and unrealized potential, was cut short in the most senseless way.
Look, I told you to leave my old lady out of this. Because when she was a big-time bootlegger, baby, she used to eat little boys like you for breakfast. I can believe it.
The lives of these stars are filled with both glittering success and heartbreaking tragedy. These stars remind us that fame isn't all red carpets and movie premieres. It is also a place where the pressures of fame, personal struggles, and tragedy go hand in hand. Their names may be remembered for their incredible performances, but their personal lives show us that behind the scenes, things weren't always as glamorous as they seemed. If you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more.